man, what is happening, y'all? All right, we are live with The Craft. My name is Nick Pollack. This is a pitching podcast, and this is our first episode live on YouTube. It's also on Twitter. So make sure if you're watching this on Twitter, go to our YouTube channel, The Craft Pitching Podcast, where all these episodes will be moving forward. And guess what? My special guest this week, I know, I can't believe that he actually answered my call this week. It is Eno Sarris. Eno, it's so good to see you.
Good to see you too. Yeah. And then my child that is upstairs has one more day before he is out of my hair and back at school.
Oh man. Wow. Oh, right. That's what happens right now. This is a big thing. I've actually been talking about with Samolsky and stuff, and like, how does it affect the baseball season and everything? And congratulations.
Yeah, I took my other son, he's at school today for his first day, the older one, to Snail versus Sale. Snell versus Sale. So I went and saw Snail. We
saw
Saul
versus Snail.
We saw Sale versus Snell, and we got for like $45, 30 rows behind home plate.
Oh my gosh.
Monday night. And so we got to see,
that is so good.
We got to see those release points, you know, and my son loves Snell. So it was really cool seeing the super over the top and then the super sideways, and we could see the movement of the pitches. It reminded me of when I was growing up in Atlanta, and I got to see Maddox and Glavine and Smoltz from behind home plate a little bit. And so he lit up, and he had a great day. And
this wasn't the first time you saw Sale behind home plate, right?
Snell.
No, but have you seen Sale behind home plate before?
This might have been the first time, like in the seats for sure. But the one thing that's really cool about working Giants games, they have the best press box in the big leagues.
Oh yeah,
it is like literally behind home plate, so you get to see the movement on most of the pitches.
It's low, it's not above.
Yeah, it's really low.
And
it's
man, that's
prime seating. I mean, someday I just expect to like come to find out that they've moved us somewhere, but for now it's the best press box in baseball. So it was really fun to see it with him, and we were trying to predict like, oh, what's he going to throw now? You know, we're going to fastball curve. You know, what's he going to do? And just geeking out on those two pitchers, which are really, really good pitchers, and it was a good day. And so today with the younger son, we're going to one of those ramen places where you have to wait in line. So that's what he gets for.
There it is, of course. And by the way, I think I want to say like in 2016 or something like that, when Sale was on the White Sox. I have a friend of mine who's here in New York, big White Sox fan, known him since college, and he was able to get like behind home plate tickets for us for a Sale Yankee game. I think Soriano hit a home run in this one.
It is a wild release point.
Yeah, and the thing is, the two-seamer, you don't really understand how that looks. That really just looks like a complete, just last minute. No, this is not going straight at all kind of pitch, because if he's come at it from that angle, it really is just straight until eventually it's just like absolutely not. The initial force of it is there, and then it just takes over with the spin. I mean, imagine you saw
movement, that. His pitch, it does, and his pitch movement numbers don't fully line up with what the experience is behind the plate. I don't think.
Yeah,
because of his arm angle. You know, when you look at the pitch movements, you're like, oh, he doesn't throw a sweeper. But when you stand behind home plate and you see him throw that slider back foot to righties, it looks like a sweeper. It looks like It looks like the longest thing you've ever seen, just like this long, like just the craziest thing. And so he's throwing that thing, and then he's throwing something that looks exactly like that then goes the other direction.
Yeah.
So it's almost sinker slider, but for some reason it's not as platoon splitty as you'd expect. And
it's bonkers because, well, I think what happens with Sale's slider specifically, that unbelievable horizontal movement, especially at that arm angle too, where it's already so far away. The number of times I've seen batters just completely give up on that slider and then come backdoor for a strike is insane. And it's kind of fun. I was thinking about this where I talk about it with the right-handers throwing sweepers to lefties, and they try to do backdoor, but it doesn't really work. And I think it's because a lot of them aren't really the extreme of Sale so far away.
They're doing it mechanically rather than sort of naturally out of the arm slot, I think.
Yeah, right.
You know, like they're manipulating the ball a little bit. to get
Yeah.
those sweeper movements. And
Right.
so I think that makes it harder to when you're manipulating the ball. I think it makes it harder. A lot of the best pitches you hear, in terms of command, in terms of nastiness, are the pitcher saying, "Well, I just throw it like my fastball and let the grid
Right.
do everything."
I mean, Mariano Rivera's cutter was just whatever, I don't know.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah. The other
and
thing that
that's
really stood out for me, watching Snell behind home plate was I'd read recently that that is supposedly a more stressful arm slot, for mechanics.
interesting.
And
Okay.
so him and Snell were both throwing 97.
Right, right.
But supposedly it was less stressful for Snell in his
Well,
slot.
this was
But
a big thing,
who's
I
been
think,
more
with
injured in the past,
well,
few
right.
years? They've
Yeah, I
both been
mean, I
kind
don't
of.
know. Yeah. With Sale, I remember this a lot with the White Sox. I mean, that was also the popular time of the W, you know,
Oh
and with like
yeah, yeah, the
Strasburg and
inverted
everything.
W or whatever.
Yeah, and Sale was one of them, and how he's throwing and everything. But I remember this distinctly. Sale was the guy that reportedly could fit himself inside of a box. Like, he was so flexible.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I'm thinking about this a lot. In the future, I hope to be really working more with youth development, essentially. And what is the number one thing I think about myself when pitching? I see a lot of these guys and think about extension, think about just general health of moving these really muscular limbs. It's flexibility. The guys who are most flexible are generally healthier, I would think. And it doesn't surprise me to hear that with Sale. It doesn't surprise me that Aaron Judge has a really healthy or healthier season this year when he's
Mm.
really moved into yoga and stuff. Arrieta talked about that for himself. Um, I really do believe that it's really easy in a sport dominated by men to say like, oh yeah, it's got to be muscles. I don't want to do yoga. I get that. I think that's changing a little. Hopefully it is. And the benefits of that, I think, are really big. And it's how Sale is able to, I don't know, not be as injured as he could have been from that arm slot.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few people who've thrown 97 from that arm slot. Like
Oh my gosh.
Randy Johnson and
It's
him
so
maybe.
he wasn't doing that too. We don't appreciate this from Sale. Like, this is not just standard Sale. He hasn't been this way since like 2018.
Right. So
You
there's
know?
been some recovery too. I do have some healthy respect for pitching development in Atlanta. I also sat down with Spencer Schwellenbach and he ran me
Mm.
through his arsenal, and I'll post that video
Oh
soon. But
man.
um, you know, they're doing some kind of interesting things in Atlanta. For one, talking to Grant Holmes and Schwellenbach and seeing that Sale's been, Velo's been good and the health has been good. I think one thing that they're doing in Atlanta is shorter bullpen sessions in between starts.
Wasn't that a thing with the Red Sox too?
Was
Was
it?
that the
And
I think so. There's someone else, maybe it was here, maybe it was with Renee Decker talking about this, but this is the
well,
second time I've heard this.
the way that it was uh, promoted to me by Holmes and Schwellenbach in particular was I need to practice these pitches at 100%.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, this is something we heard from Joe Ryan about his splitter. He was like, I was practicing my splitter in bullpens and it looked one way. And then I got in the game and was throwing 100% and it looked a whole nother way and it just
Right.
wasn't working. So what they've done is I crap you not, they're boiling it down to 15 or 16 pitches
Doesn't surprise
in
me.
their
Yeah.
bullpens in between starts. That's a
Mm.
really low number. I've heard 30 or 40 in the past. I mean,
Right,
that's
right.
at least half of, and I think, even some others do more than that. And
Yeah.
so, the idea used to be that you need to kind of keep that 80 or that 100 pitches in you. And so you need to do like sort of half that, to
Yeah,
like,
sure, sure.
kind of keep it going. But they're
Mhm.
like, no, no, no. I'm just practicing shapes and certain things that I want to do. Schwellenbach was like, glove side fastball. I need to practice glove side fastball. He in particular, what's interesting is that he's actually trying to kill the horizontal on his four seam
Yep.
because he has
Okay.
a lower release and he's
Mhm.
trying to have that low flat, you
Yep.
know,
Right.
on
Right,
the
right, right.
fastball, and
Yep.
if he has this kind of release where if he lets it go normally, it'll be like a two-seamer. And
Yeah,
that'll
right.
be what hitters see the slot. And they say, this is going to be a two-seamer. It's going to go like this. And
Mm.
so he's trying to kill it. So he's throwing a fastball that has a little bit of cut, but he
Yeah.
also,
Oh, yeah, no, he certainly, like, absolutely is at that, which is kinda why upstairs, I'm a little weirded out by it from him.
but he also throws a cutter.
Yeah, well, right, that is a true, like, it's a dip cut for the
Yeah.
four-seamer, but it's a true horizontal ride cut
Yeah.
on the
And then
cutter.
he throws a slider.
Yeah, the slide, it's a
So,
proper bridge pitch, that cutter, yeah.
but he agreed with me that for Spencer, and I'm glad that we loved him so much to begin with, and he's pitching so well. I mean, he had 2 starts in a row. It was like 22 strikeouts and 0 walks and 2
Yeah,
strikes in 2 starts. So like he's
it's
he's
pretty
killing
good.
it. At least we were right about one thing on this podcast.
Yes.
But he says he's got the slider. He says the
Yeah,
foundation is the four seam and the slider. So his
yeah.
bullpens are four seam cutter curve.
Well,
And
what's
so
interesting is he also has a splitter that he just shows up with sometimes.
yeah, he said that one is just sometimes it's there and sometimes not. And
Well, that's
he
the thing.
doesn't
What do you
think
know?
he wants.
Splitters are volatile, guys. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, crazy.
No, but you can get with somebody who has it as like their fourth option, right? You
Well,
know,
that's
like,
no, that's what I'm saying. I know it's just like
yeah.
it's a common thing. And actually, with Joe Ryan, I wanted to really hit on that because it makes all the sense in the world that if you're throwing a splitter of all pitches at different velocities or different strengths, that is very much of a you can over grip a splitter or not, right? And the
Mhm.
intensity on release, if you're
And that's
squeezing it too much, that changes everything with it.
And that's what he was saying, that like even in my shorter, higher intensity bullpens, I'm still only at like 80%. And so
Yeah,
the
right.
practicing the
Right.
splitter still doesn't make a lot of sense. And there's
Yeah.
no way I'm gonna get to game day stress levels in my bullpen because I'm not, it's
Yeah.
not that environment. It's like there's nobody
Yeah.
yelling, you know. It's like I'm
Yeah,
just like
exactly.
in a bullpen.
Oh man,
So anyway,
that's wild.
you know, that was not. And so he also ran me through that he has improved the curveball. If you notice the last 2 starts, the curveball's been better. He's been using it more. He switched his grip. He's spiking the
Mhm.
thing, and that's why his bullpen sessions are fastball, cutter, curve, because
Right.
those are the pitches he's working on. The fastball and the cutter he has to keep separate. You know,
Mhm. Yep.
his fastball he's cutting a little bit, but you know, anyway, that was not the wildest thing I heard that day.
What was that?
The wildest thing I heard that day was when I went and talked to Grant Holmes.
Oh yeah, the real estate broker because he grants homes.
So ready to have children. So this is the wildest thing I've ever heard. So he sees me run through this whole thing with Spencer Schwannbank, and because they're locker mates. And so I'm like, hey, if you've got time for me too, like I want to talk to you too.
That's the best. Oh my gosh.
And he was like, yeah. And I was like, listen, I was looking at your minor league, and and he's like, long. And I was like, yeah, I mean, yeah. So one thing that I really noticed is, so your strikeout rate just like went through the roof when you got to Atlanta. Like,
Mm,
what did you do differently that you weren't doing in Oakland for 6+ years? It's almost like 7
yeah,
years with Oakland. And this
right?
is the wildest thing I've ever heard. We tried a slider.
As in, like, he didn't have one before?
Ah!
What? When does that happen?
What?
I mean, you know what? Okay, I have a very simple explanation for this, Eno. Very simple. It's Oakland who doesn't
It's
invest.
Oakland. That's
right?
the answer. It's Oakland.
They just let them do whatever.
Yes.
And they don't have like, okay, cool. Let's do, like every company does with their products or their staff. They go, okay, cool. Let's do some performance reviews. What are the things that we should be doing here? Flip this over. Oh, wow. Lots of previous performance reviews because you've been in the minors so long.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's insane though. How is that not just like the first? You're a right-hander. Can you throw a slider? That is not the conversation.
I couldn't. I was like, I said some expletive Oakland, and he goes, "Yep."
Wow.
Like,
So how's he? Okay, so
crap.
what kind of slider did they teach him? How's he feel with it? Did you get any of that?
So it's a regular boring ass
Oh my
slider.
god.
It's 2 fingers on the thing. It's
Yeah,
just a
it's on the
slider.
horseshoe bottom of it. Yeah, it comes over the
Yes,
top. Yeah.
nothing I didn't even take a picture of it. I was like,
Did
"What?"
he just throws it over the top like a fastball and just like, "There you go, it's done?"
I mean,
Does
it's a
he,
little
like,
bit to
even
the
think
side,
about it?
like,
Yeah.
it's just a slider.
Yeah,
Here's
it's a
I
soup,
think
yeah.
so what I don't to so let's you always wanna give grace because there's real people in these jobs trying their
Sure.
hardest, you know? I
I
think
just think they're funded.
the idea was to some extent that he had a good curve and maybe he didn't wanna blend the slider and the curve, so they taught him a
Mhm.
cutter, and he still throws the cutter some.
Yeah.
But I just it still boggles the mind that they wouldn't have tried a slider. And the reason we're laughing, if you're not catching on, is that this is a slider league. Like 90% of the league throws a slider. You
Yeah.
know, it seems to be almost step one for like, do you want to be a
Right.
big leaguer? You got to have a slider. You know, like
Yeah,
that's all.
the only pitcher I can really think of that has a lot of success that doesn't throw a slider is Aaron Nola. That's the only and that's a cutter, you know?
Yeah,
Like, maybe there's even a sweeper in there at times too. It's just like, I can't no.
I
No.
I do want to jump into that section in the real just
Yeah.
to finish off Grant's story where
Oh,
so
please.
he's got this good curveball
Yeah.
and so they're teaching him a cutter and then he comes to Atlanta and one of the things they do is um, make him a reliever
Mhm.
and I think this was really intentional. So they make him a reliever and the first series with Atlanta he's a reliever and all he throws are fastballs and sliders. So he's not even
Hmm.
throwing his bread and butter
Yeah.
curveball that he
Yeah,
thought would
yeah,
get him
yeah,
to the
yeah.
big leagues. Not even throwing that.
Oh my
And
gosh.
what he does is he gets a velo boost from relieving,
Okay.
and then they move him back to starting, and he
Mhm.
holds on to some of that velo boost.
That's curious.
I think it's because it's sort of a mindset where, like, when
Mhm.
you're relieving, you're like, I'm gonna throw as hard as I can until
Oh,
they take the
right,
ball away
right,
from me, right? And I
right.
think what they did was sort of jog that mindset so that when he's starting, he still has that. I'm just gonna throw as hard as I can until they take the ball from me. And
Right, but I
so
mean, obviously, the negative, though, the reason that doesn't always happen is because A, you burn out quicker, and B, we don't want max effort for so many pitches, right?
yeah, I know,
Yeah,
but I think also when you're dealing with somebody who is like 28 and like hasn't made it to the big leagues
great
yet,
point. Yeah,
you're kind of
yeah.
like,
Got nothing to lose, let's just see
what,
how long
yeah,
I can hold this. Yeah,
yeah. What
absolutely.
if you're the starter for 50 innings at the beginning of the season and you're a reliever for 50 innings at the end of the season, whatever, you know, like we'll
Yeah,
take whatever we
exactly.
can get. And
Totally
you're
good,
a
yeah,
better pitcher now that you've spent a whole season throwing this slider,
right.
you know, and averaging 94 plus. So now, you know, as a starter, he's closer to 94-ish, you know, and he's got a real slider. And now he brings back the curveball that he's always had. And underlying it, as he agreed, was a good sense of command. Like that was one of
Yeah,
his best.
he's a this is actually, this is something that I think we've highlighted or talked about a lot with guys, is there's a lot of these rookies that come up and we get really excited, but like, are they actually someone that is gonna be consistent enough to really stick around for a long time, right? Kind of still out on or jury's still out for me on, like, say, Spencer Arrighetti, because he
Mm.
has those flashes of it's great, but I don't know if you can really throw enough strikes with the secondary still and the four-seamer and actually get four-seamer where it needs to be.
Hmm.
The, with Hayden Birdsong, the jury is back, and I'm like, I cannot trust this guy. He's gonna have
Okay.
moments, but I don't feel this way. And
He's
yeah, you had something on
other
him too.
other
Yeah.
most bizarre thing that I
Yeah.
saw this week. It's Hayden Birdsong's changeup grip.
Oh, right. Does he have I guess he did. He showed a couple of them. Oh, it's a spiked changeup?
He calls it the kickstand.
Oh my gosh.
I
Wait,
love
okay, okay, okay. So
it.
he's doing this? It's like a
Yes.
circle change. So he's got the circle over here.
A little bit further along the along
Yeah,
and
well, like here, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. The
So
kickstand.
his point was that he's such an aggressive two finger breaking ball
Oh,
guy.
that's the middle finger spiking.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh
that's a
my
middle
god. Oh,
finger.
I get it. I see it now.
So the
Oh my
idea is he's such an aggressive two finger
circle
guy that
over
he needs
here.
to kickstand that finger to get it off the ball too.
Oh my gosh. What? Can you Like, why?
And can you
Especially
imagine
now,
he
like,
throws it like 83 miles an hour? Can you imagine throwing
okay,
that pitch 83 miles an hour?
first of all, I personally could never get behind any of the spiked stuff. It never worked for me. It's
Mm.
also kind of why I never really liked knuckleball. Essentially, doing anything that's this coming out is just wrong to me. It just doesn't.
He
It needs to just glide. I don't want to be thinking about those things. For
well,
him,
so
maybe it's just don't touch it. Yeah. Sorry.
here's the thing though. I think a lot of times with with the knuckling and stuff, the idea is almost the same as this.
Yeah. Right.
They're not. He's not. I asked him, are
He's
you
not doing
flicking?
this. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Matt Latos used to have a changeup grip called the Critter, where he flicked it.
The critter.
Yeah, and he flicked it. It also had some sort of,
Oh man, I would think
name that you're not allowed to say on
well,
TV.
chitter. I would say chitter.
But
I know you're going to probably replace the first letter.
Hayden Burnsong was saying that like with that kickstanded thing, he's just trying to get the. I can't even hold it. Like,
I
dude,
oh
like,
man,
what?
that is a thing.
Like you're really
I
you're like pulling this finger off and then also
yeah.
kickstanding this one. Like it's like
Oh,
some weird
also the
dinosaur.
index finger. You're kickstanding that guy too.
No, the index finger is off in a circle.
Oh yeah, it's a circle change, guys. If you're
It's a
listening right
circle,
now,
and
what
then you kickstand
Eno's
the
showing,
middle.
this is why you got to look at the YouTube video these days
Yeah.
now because we're live. It's a circle change, a two-seam grip. Just think of it like that, two-seam grip. You have it over, and then you bring up your middle finger. Essentially,
I don't even have the flexibility in the fingers to do it, really.
I have, as you can see, guys, I can get my fingers around the ball pretty easily.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I've got mitts. All right, this is what do you know? As a pitcher, shocking. More at 11.
But his idea was like, and a lot of the idea, like with AJ Burnett's knuckle curve, and a lot of that's the one I taught my son is just to get that finger out of the way.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily you're doing anything with that spike finger. And some people think you have to like dig that spike finger in. No, it's a little bit more about sort of resting it. You know, that's why people call it a knuckle curve. It's not that you're doing anything with the knuckle, you're just sort of resting it. It's almost the same thing as Adam Wainwright's, pointing the finger in the sky.
Well, that's the first curveball that everyone learns. If you're unfamiliar, you have your index finger and your middle finger in between. And then actually, I'm so sorry. The middle finger is the one going on the seam. The index finger is before, and then as you release, it's called popping the gun. Where you push your finger forward. You pop the gun.
That's what it is. I didn't know that was a sort of a basic approach, but I think
and then you're like pointing forward and you make the idea
both the idea is get the index finger out of the way.
Exactly. Which is so stupid because the index finger is the most important finger. I don't care. I couldn't do anything without the index finger. It was like, that's the one that like I get the most nerves and sensory information from. I can't not use this thing.
Well, either way, those are the two most bizarre things that I heard this week, and it did set me thinking about this sort of the process of adding a new pitch. I mean,
right. So let's do that. Let's talk about a little bit of guys that are missing a slider. Can maybe add one. We have some from the comments, which is awesome. We're going to talk about all of that after this break. So we have actually from the chat here, as we transition to this, I love this topic of like, who are those guys that actually could unlock what we think are pretty much the best pitch in baseball is a slider. Like I think it's bar none. It is more important for right-handers. I think you'd agree with that than lefties, which does bring up a little bit of the tweet I put out yesterday, which I think is obvious. It's just, I feel like I needed to say it out loud more, is that if you're a lefty, a changeup to me, elite changeup is more important than an elite slider because you're dealing with right-handers more.
Splits, yeah.
Right. And it just makes sense. And you look at all the elite lefties, like a lot of them, Tarek Skubal and Cole Reagan's, you had Max Fried's amazing 2 years with a changeup. You have Blake Snell's changeup waking up. I mean, it's a big reason for a lot of these guys having success. And even Tyler Anderson this year, look at that elite changeup. Look at that.
I'm looking at the list of pitchers without sliders, and there's a fair amount of lefties near the top. And you've got Jose Quintana, known for his curve and change. You've got James Paxton, who used to have
the cutter slider thing that was
the hard vicious. Cutter slider thing that is now gone, which is part of why I'm surprised that Boston even traded for him.
Sinkers. They actually threw him with sinkers, by the way, and it worked kind of.
Ty Block and Ryan Yarbrough, who were very close to the same person.
Yeah, Yarbrough is this cutter guy. So,
and also both have changeups and soft tossing, and barely in baseball. Jalen Beeks, changeup. Trevor, that's right-hander. Trevor Richards is a right-hander.
Yes.
But you know, if you take the Nick Lodolo is kind of interesting not having a slider, but
Well,
his
right. Is
curve
that
is
slider
hard.
really a curveball? It's
Yeah,
like the Rich
exactly.
Hill and Chris Sale thing. You have such a low arm angle where you essentially throw a curveball grip from there, and it's just the arm angle that makes it like a slider, right?
Yeah, I guess, on the righty side, this is where, my eyebrow raises. And you're right. Aaron
Mm,
Nola's on there and he's added the cutter recently, but the curve is just a really strong pitch for him.
so good.
Aaron Nola, Charlie Morton, Adam Wainwright, that seems to be like an archetype
Yeah,
where they
absolutely.
never
Curveball
really
flight.
had a
Yeah.
good slider. Even their cutters were, I mean, Wainwright had an okay cutter, but it's more like his fastball than
hmm
a slider. So
There's one guy who it was just like pure curveball for a while that we really liked. Like one of the hardest ones, and that was Lance McCullers.
yeah,
And
Lance
I
McCullers.
remember
But
I said this
he added a
before.
slider
Well,
eventually.
here's the thing. So Alex and I, early in January 2023, we did talking pitching with him. I still think I have the video of it. We didn't put it out, but we were like, "Hey, tell us about the slider. Like, how are you throwing this thing?" And what he'd said essentially is a sweeper. But guys, I can't believe what I saw. And it's like one of those times where you get a player to tell you something, and you're just like nodding, like, "Oh yeah, cool, cool, cool," and it's just like, and you're dying inside as he says it, right? And
Sort of like
the
me
word
looking at Birdsong's changeup grip, like, what?
yeah, well, that's like, okay, if that works for you, awesome.
Yeah,
But what
right,
he
I
said
guess.
was, "I do this, I have this, and then I
Uh-huh.
released it like I'm throwing a pizza." And I go, "I'm sorry, what?" You're like so like you're turning your wrist completely,
Oh my god.
palm up, going across. Goes, "Yeah, yeah, that's it." And I'm
Wow.
like, I'm just holding it all back because I'm like, "Well, that elbow's done."
Yeah.
Uh, when I mean, look, I'm not the guy that's like, "Oh, injury done. Okay, every single guy is gonna get hurt," all that kind of stuff. Fine. There
Yeah.
are some pretty absolute truths, I think. One is if you throw a legitimate screwball, there's no way doing this on release is gonna be fine in the long term. And to me, by the way,
Yeah,
screwball to me is
Dallas
if you have a
Braden's
curveball that's like this, you just literally have to reverse it to do like the walk the Egyptian thing to be able
Dallas
to throw it.
Braden said that, his surgeon said it was the worst shoulder he'd seen.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that's the ultra pronating side. And then the
Uh-huh.
ultra supinating side is like when old guys, when you're like 12 or 13, you see you throw a breaking ball, so you're gonna throw out your arm. That's what they mean. That you're like
Yeah.
literally twisting your wrist too much
Yeah,
on release.
yeah.
And that's just what he's doing in front of me. He's like doing this. I'm like,
I
why?
think there's probably a biomechanical reason that it's
Why?
not a good idea because,
Oh,
basically in your forearm, a lot of this, like the when you talk about flexor strains and why that
yeah.
leads to Tommy John, is that the flexor mass and a lot of this stuff in your forearm is there to protect your elbow. It's like
Mm,
taking stress away from the elbow ligament because
right.
the way that I understand it from the piece that I did about how hard can we absolutely throw,
Mhm.
we're at that point right now. And they were talking about, oh, the stress that we're putting on the UCL tears in
Yeah.
cadavers, right? And he's
Mhm.
like, well, the reason why it doesn't tear every single time they throw this hard is because in a cadaver, you're just holding the cadaver's thing,
Yeah.
putting a weight
Yeah,
on
yeah.
it, being like, oops, torn. Whereas in your body, your
Right.
even your bones will take some of the stress. Your bones,
Yeah,
your
sure.
other muscles, your other ligaments.
Did we see that? Did we see like
So
an arm fracture once from someone and that was just by
yeah.
throwing?
Yeah,
Oh boy.
the Rays guy who like threw a ball and his arm
Oh
fractured while he did it.
gosh. Oh god, I don't want to think about that again. I'm so sorry. But
Anyway,
here's actually a thing everyone can
yeah.
do at home is put your arm out straight. Just put your arm out straight and put your other hand over your elbow. Sorry, yeah, inside where inside here. Just put it out straight. And then now make it so that your palm is up and
Yeah.
just go back and forth and then now just twist without turning your forearm. You will feel your ligament like
Yeah, like
move
moving
up.
around, popping around.
It's
Yeah.
just like you're doing that stress every time. I see how tight it is all of a sudden. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Don't do this. Do not. Oh gosh. So yeah, that's sorry. That was Lance
So, I mean,
McCullers from the super hard
that does
curve. That
speak
was
to some
there
of
you go.
that speaks to some of the injuries across baseball, and sort of one
Yeah.
of the fundamental problems is that the slider's really good, and how do you achieve a good slider without doing all that? You know, you
Right.
want to have a good slider that you're not super stressing yourself out because you're going to throw it 30% of the time in this league, you know?
Right.
And the guys who haven't done it, who have been successful, I think the easiest rule of thumb is, do they have an elite curveball?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that I think so. I think that the people that don't have an elite curveball and don't have a slider and are right-handed that are young is a short list, and Taj Bradley is on top of it.
Yeah, this
Just
is
sitting
actually the
square on
first
top of
one
it.
brought here. This is Kyle Bland saying no slider for Taj Bradley.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
the thing is that he does have a cutter though.
And he uses it a
And
little bit like a slider.
right, he's very much like a I mean, my interpretation is here's my four-seamer. I'm gonna throw the cutter like a four-seamer and try to play off of it. What I've noticed is that this year, with Taj Bradley going from four-seamer, cutter, curve, has essentially just gone, okay, I'm going to throw the splitter now as my number two instead. And I normally would be like, I don't know, but he's been able to get over 60% strikes on the splitter more times than not, and he's pulled back on the cutter. And I feel like the cutter doesn't do enough to be different, or at least it's obvious enough when he throws it, because this cutter, it's not the Kodai Senga. Like, he could be just a mimic of Kodai Senga, Taj Bradley, right? I mean, with the worst command of a splitter, fine. But the four-seamer, as far as chaos goes, and then pairing with that cutter inside the zone, that could work. But yeah, something has to be tweaked here. And I think you're right, and you're onto something that, like, I don't think this cutter is the answer. Maybe if he does go to a more traditional slider approach, it would be better.
Yeah. I just love Taj Bradley's fastball shape so much, and
Oh, it's
like
so good.
I just
Oh,
want him to be able to add to that, and
yeah.
I think it'll happen, and it's definitely the type of player that I want to sort of bet on. But you know, we've talked a lot about another guy on this list. He is a lefty, but Kyle Harrison, like if he had a legit slider, I think he'd still be better than what he is now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I just sat through his start last night, and it is a little bit like sitting through a start because it's just fastball after fastball with
oh my
poor
gosh.
command, and hitters just eventually somebody, you know, puts the right swing on the fastball at the right time.
Right. It was interesting to see him be a little bit better with changeups down yesterday.
Yeah, he
And
did some more of those.
right. And yeah, like the world that I see with Kyle Harrison is like slowly and steadily he's getting a little bit more precise with that four-seamer in the zone. The curve, he just can't extend down on it. I don't know what it is. Every single curve is just up in arm side. He cannot hold on to that thing long enough.
I've heard that he is
is
not a good pronator, which I think actually can affect your curveball.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it's a pronating pitch, right?
All right.
I think of it like that.
Supinating
Yeah.
is the changeup. Yeah, he's not a good pronator. So
Is that right? Wait, did I get that right? No, pronating is, you're right. Pronating is changeup.
Pronating is changeup, but
I think of curveball as closer to pronating. Supinating, I feel like you're on the side of it. Curve, you have to stay true, you know, and a changeup as it relates, you do want to stay true. So I think of it more as a pronating, but it probably is more of a supinating. I'm just being dumb.
Well, just generally, he's not good at something because he's breaking balls, because breaking ball's not good either, right? Breaking ball and changeup's not good either. So if his changeup's not good and he says he's not a good pronator, then that might make sense. But if he was a good supinator, then he would have a slider. So you know, there's something missing with Kyle Harrison, and I'm just not sure it's going to be there. But Taj Bradley, at least the story is that he hasn't been pitching as long, and you know, he's kind of coming into his own. Spencer Schwellenbach, as an example, did not pitch in college until junior year.
Oh, wow.
So there's a little bit of that with him too. How about Dean Kramer? Like,
oh man,
give Dean Kramer a great slider instead of the okay cutter he throws.
Oh, but the cutter is how he gets through games.
I know it's so. Are we just gonna call that his slider?
I mean, well, it isn't a slider. I mean, what's important to understand, I think what you're really trying to, elucidate is that sliders are how you excel, right? You can't, you really can't. Yeah, as a right-hander, it is so hard to find a elite pitcher who just doesn't have a slider that's really dependable, right?
Because it does so good for action and for called strikes, because you can do both things with it. Whereas a cutter is a little bit closer to called strikes and weak contact. It's not as
Right.
good for whiffs. If you just look at, sort of pitch type splits, you'll see that
Yep.
the cutter doesn't get as many whiffs.
It's why we're okay with the guys like Jared Jones and Spencer Strider with four-seamer slider, because it's just like whatever. Hunter Green, like sliders are amazing, four-seamers are amazing. To me, those are the two best pitches to be elite at.
Closest, and if it's a power slider, they're the two closest pitches to being platoon neutral.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, right. Great point. So yeah, Dean Kramer, man. Kramer is just, I watch him and it's like one night he's like, cool, here's cutters here, here's four-seamers here, here's a splitter working, here's kitchen sink, except for I guess a slider. And that works sometimes, and that's
another night how like, I wish you had a dominant pitch that you could throw for a whip.
Yeah, I wish you yeah, exactly.
That wasn't your four-seamer cutter,
You know who's also likely on that list? I mean, I guess this so it's interesting. We are obviously distinguishing between a sweeper and a slider. And when I hear slider, I guess these days it's more gyro, right?
I've just used the Fangraphs board, which actually doesn't split them yet. I think it will in the future.
Right. So the reason I bring that up is like I hear, oh wait, you need a dominant pitch to kind of take over. And that's
you could have a sweeper and still need a slider, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think Cutter Crawford kind of is like that.
Oh, he has everything around a good slider.
Right. Four-seamer, cutter, sweeper. Sometimes the splitter shows up, whatever. Sometimes the curveball, whatever. But it's those three. And watching him, a thing that I've kind of said the entire year, but it felt like he's a common, hey, look, if I have all three, I'm amazing. I'm great. If everything's working with each other, that's great. If there are any cracks in any of it, I don't feel that two of those are good enough as, you need that third piece. And he doesn't have like that pitch he turns to. He doesn't have like, oh, cool, I'm in a jam right now, first and second, 2 outs in the sixth. I need to get this guy out. What am I throwing? I'm going to throw like 3 sliders in a row. Like we've seen that from guys before. I'm like, who cares? I got this. He doesn't have that. The cutter is there for called strikes or whatever. The four-seamer sometimes gets that whiff upstairs, but if you don't get it past that guy, okay. Then maybe they chase a sweeper. Maybe it's good enough in that one moment. I don't know. But you need that slider. It's just like, no, man. I'm burning you with this right now.
And then the sweeper doesn't help you against lefties as much. So then you become fastball cutter. You become more predictable. Maybe the curve is like really, really a third pitch for him. I mean, there's something going on. And another thing, and I'll write this piece eventually, but in this league, hitters are sitting slider more often. And so I think with cutter, that's sitting cutter. So if you're sitting cutter, against him and you're a lefty and you're not going to see the sweeper, you can sit cutter, maybe adjust curve, fight off four seam and have success against him,
Yeah, definitely. Is there someone else that you want to bring up that might benefit?
Well, how about Zebby Matthews? Because
man, I wanted to. Okay.
Thing, I mean, I thought it was great.
I had to talk about him. We got to talk about Matthew Boyd too. And we're going to talk about both of those guys after this break. I had to cut you off. You gotta do it after the break, After the break. All right, here we go. So as I really interrupted there, we have to talk about Zebby Matthews. I wanted to do this today. If you're watching on YouTube, you see already I put Zebby Matthews as the title. Was not going to let this happen without talking about Zebby. Tell me what you saw here, last night in his MLB debut for the Twins.
Well, I think what I saw was a sweeper that has been separated out from a cutter or power slider. He had a really nice looking 89, 90 mile an hour hard slider.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why how he sort of fits into this conversation is he Cutter Crawford with a four seam cutter sweeper curve, or is that a legit power slider? He got some really nice whiffs off of it against lefties, and separating that power slider cutter thing from the sweeper apparently was a big step forward in his development process.
So you're calling it a sweeper though, at the 86 mile per hour slider?
Yeah.
So
did it register?
I don't know. I mean, so we have you can check it out. I put it on Twitter. I asked it from Kyle, and this is how Kyle Bland works, everyone. I said, oh, hey, I know we have this minor league app where we can look up individual pitchers from AAA and their pitch types, but I don't have one for like the whole, like all 5 of them on like the pitch plot of movement. Can you just send me Zebby Matthews? It goes, hey, hold on 1 second. So what you did, you just added it for literally everyone. So now you have it in minor leagues. Now you can look up AAA whole movement charts for all of them. And looking at it, the slide, I mean, traditionally when I see a sweeper, I'm thinking like a negative 10 to 15 or so on the x-axis, and like pretty even on the y at 0 or so above or below.
10 is
and this
the
wasn't that. Yeah, it was around, with the minor league one was around 0 or so, or like maybe -5 at most. Where the cutter was above that in maybe like +1, +2. Then the four seamers.
So he's throwing a cutter and a power gyro.
Yeah, 87 or so. That cutter, I love this cutter. Oh my gosh, I love this cutter. Him against Bobby Witt in the first inning, even the second at bat of the game.
Yeah, I tweeted something from the 3rd or 4th at bat where he just got he threw the cutter 90 miles an hour in on the hands of a lefty, and they were just they blew him up.
And the thing is, he did the same thing to MJ Melendez. And I'm like, as he's throwing it, the glove is right there on the inside edge to a lefty, executes it perfectly. It's 90-91, this cutter. I see Melendez hit it. I'm like, oh, what a great pitch. This is a can of corn out. Destroys it right center field. Gone. And I'm like, what? I literally said, wow, what a great pitch.
I still have hope for Melendez as a hitter. I know it's a pitching podcast, but I still have hope for him as a hitter just because he has the raw talent. It's you see it in moments like that, but he has minus approach. Like he probably shouldn't have even swung at that pitch. You know what I mean?
It was actually like a borderline strike, right? But maybe you don't want to still swing at it because generally you're not going to
normally get sawed off by it, right?
Right. And the thing is, Adam Frazier swung at a similar 1-2-2 later on that came a little bit further in off the plate.
That might have been the one that I think that was the one that I that's the one.
Oh my gosh,
it was so good.
Love it.
And I knew that you would love Zebby Matthews because I was looking at his location values, and they are above average for 4 of his 5 pitch types. And so you have a foundational above average to good. I don't know if there's an elite pitch in there yet. We'll still have to see.
Yeah, no, but, I agree with you there.
Above average 4-seam slider cutter, and then he commands the curve and the sinker well. So it all works together in concert, I think. So
yeah. And the changeup is something that it wasn't quite there yet. There were times he got on the side of it too much. Fine. I just gotta get Pablo to teach it to him, obviously. But no, with what we normally see in MLB debuts are guys who are not polished yet. They are more stuff focused, or if they are command guys, they usually have like one of them working, and they're really wrestling a lot. There's a lot of adrenaline. And what I saw today looked like a veteran almost, of just like, oh yeah, no, I've been here before. I know what I'm doing. I'm putting this over here. I'm doing this over here. And even when he would make mistakes, because he certainly did that, the slider was bounced multiple times by Zebby Matthews. He then adjusted it, and he came back. And like, I remember one at bat, actually, it was, he threw a slider. He spiked it 1-0, spiked it again. So he said, fine. And he dotted 95 on the outside edge, like just down and away, perfect 2-0 to 2-1. It's like, all right, fine. Okay, let me recalibrate. Okay. And like, you don't see that. What you see in the next pitch is just a random fastball somewhere in the zone. Not like, all right, fine. Here's a good fastball. Got it. Okay, next. You know, that kind of guy throwing what we saw as above average metrics on pitch shape across the board, even from release, like 1.1, height adjusted VAA around 16 inches of vert, slightly above average extension, like 6'7", 6'8", at 95, 96, which might come down, but that's kind of what the report was too, was for Zebby. And that was his whiff pitch in the minors. That only earned 1 whiff last night. So that's the thing I'm kind of curious about, to see if that 4-seamer can turn more into a elevated whiff pitch. And especially if you have that cutter that he's nailing down glove side, that itself is this amazing tandem of just, I can just put this here or there, and you don't even know inside to a lefty, like which one it is. To a right-hander, you can mess around with. Is it coming down? Is it not? There's a lot of things here, and I also think we haven't seen the curve and change yet. Like that will show up because it's your MLB debut. You can do so much.
Yeah. I have in my minor league sample that I'm looking at, he threw the curve about half as much as a slider. So he threw it a fair amount, and he threw the changeup about that much too.
Yeah.
Stuff Plus didn't like the changeup, but that's a pretty small sample to be
Mhm.
deciding the changeup is good or
What
bad.
did you think about the slider? The 86.
That was 120 Stuff Plus.
Yeah, we had a
That's his best
5.6
pitch.
PLV. 5.6 PLV in the minors. And the thing is, I'm
4-seam
getting
fastball only 97 Stuff Plus, so
oh, that's
that's
interesting.
basically right on average. So
Yeah, which
that might
right,
not
right.
produce a bunch of that might not produce a bunch of
Yeah, that
whiffs.
might have been a minor leaguer thing than a major league thing. I will say the foundation of the four-seam and cutter and the command of that, setting up what we like as a slider that should be more, I don't know, overwhelming moving forward. Yeah, I like this kid. I'm a big fan of Daniel Zebulon and Matthews,
Yeah, I
which is
mean,
actually his name, by the way, if you didn't know that.
returning to our earlier conversation, he has a slider.
Yeah,
He has a slider, and he has command. Like his location plus numbers are through the roof, actually.
yeah.
So
I'm not
I think
surprised
that's
to
what
hear
you
that.
were sort of reacting to when you're talking about, him being able to put the fastball he wants to. Like, I
It's
haven't seen location
awesome.
numbers this good very often. I mean, 120s, like we don't have that usually.
Oh wow! And this is a debut again. Like what? His total PLV on all of his pitches, 508 on the fastball, which is above average, 591 on the slider, which is 99th percentile if it qualified. Cutter is a 516, which is actually only 41 PLV. Kind of interesting there. But 591 is just ridiculous. All right, so we like Zebby Matthews. Anything you wanted to add on Zabby? Add on Zebby.
Nope. No, I don't think he doesn't fit my list of somebody I need to give a slider to. I like that, it's one of the things that, I liked about him. I was wondering if it was as a sweeper or not, but I feel better now that it's not. I mean, this is a pretty platoon safe arsenal.
Yeah,
Think about it.
definitely.
His slider is not the one that you don't throw to lefties. He's got a power cutter that looked really good against lefties.
Mm-hmm.
He may not even need the change. He may never really throw it a lot.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The other guy I really wanted to bring up is Matthew Boyd returning.
Boys.
Boyd boys. Okay. The history of Matthew Boyd with us is there were times in the past that he flirted with throwing 94 and change. He's had Tommy John. He's gone through a lot of things, and now he's back. And he came into this as a Guardians pitcher, and I gotta say, it looked really weird seeing him in a Guardians uniform. It's such a stark difference from the Detroit Tigers jersey, and it just doesn't feel right. But whatever, fine, I'll get through this. What I saw was actually better locations than I expected, especially for your first game back from Tommy John. Four seamers are upstairs really well. Changeups and sliders were at the very bottom of the zone, not really underneath it much and a little bit wild. But he was never really like having. I don't remember a scenario where Matthew Boyd had both a slider and a changeup working at the same time. There was a moment he had his changeup working, but then the slider was actually
I
disappearing.
think I'm always talking to him about his changeup. Yeah. He's
Right.
always
And the
like, "Oh,
changeup
I
looked good
tweaked it.
yesterday.
I got it. It's good."
Right. And it felt like watching it. No, this thing was actually doing what's supposed to. The velocity at 92 and change is a little disappointing. I was hoping at least the adrenaline would show us higher velocity, and maybe it might be down in the future because the adrenaline goes away, and that was the adrenaline version. But I am curious about your take on Boyd and how he fits in with a lot of these injured pitchers coming back with the current landscape, also with the with starting pitchers right now.
Yeah, I don't know. This was one of the more sort of horizontal, less vertical changeups he's thrown. I guess maybe more of a maybe a little bit more of a two-seam movement. And I don't see necessarily though a big difference in it. He has been throwing it a little bit harder over time, but it's just an awkward changeup because it is neither a straight changeup, it's 12-mile-an-hour gap,
Right.
and it's not a power changeup in terms of the movement profile. It moves less than his sinker horizontally, and only has 2 more inches of drop over his sinker. But it does bring up the fact that, he does use four seam and sinker. And one of the hardest things, to do is to figure out how to define a pitch off of which fastball.
Right,
So I
right.
guess if you define the changeup off of the four seam, he has 2 inches more horizontal movement and 5 inches more drop than his four seam. So what would you be? I guess as a righty, you wouldn't see too many sinkers. So you'd be defining that changeup off of the four seam.
Yeah, probably right. I mean,
in which case it comes off as like slightly below average, just sort of number scouting.
Yeah, good stuff. I would think that I've seen this trend a little bit. I know we know it watching it because it's more gorgeous because of the camera angles of like the front hip sinker as a right-hander to a left-hander. But I've been seeing it actually a decent amount for these sinker guys to actually throw them inside to right-handers. A popular one, I think, to me is Eduardo Rodriguez, who actually had a decent strikeout rate called strikes with that pitch inside.
That's kind of a front door then.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, not backdoor. Yeah, absolutely right. Oh man, I correct so many people on that one. Oh my gosh.
Did you say backdoor? I don't even know if you said.
No, I think it's a front hip, maybe not.
Yeah, you said front hip and inside. I'm just saying for my edification, you to visualize it. Kind of front
right. Well, it's front hip
again.
It's lefty throwing a front hip to a righty.
And it is something that I don't see as often because the camera angles aren't good for it. That's
we don't know that it is.
Right? It looks beautiful when a righty does it to a lefty.
It's the only times you see it are in Houston because they are a lefty favored camera angle. And it's really good for Framber Valdez. And it's like you see the movement on Framber Valdez's sinker.
Yeah.
It's really nice for him.
Yeah. I think the default camera angle is almost like over the pitcher's right shoulder.
Yeah. And what needs to happen, we need to have 2 cameras. One for lefties, one for righties.
Oh, give us access to the behind the home plate of you.
Oh my gosh, the umpire cam?
Yes.
I mean, let's be honest here. In like 5-10 years, we're going to be able to just put on our headsets and be at the stadium and just walk around it and sit wherever the heck we want to watch this game.
I mean, that's the future of cameras. They have cameras everywhere. Like, what we already are seeing is that AI is helping us switch from camera to camera and have the right zooms. There are these sort of AI coaches for the cameras that can kind of almost help produce the show, where it can be like, oh, I know where that hit is going. Like that camera.
Right. Follow the track of the ball off the bat, that kind of
stuff. And maybe even you could add in some sort of predictive analytics into the AI where you're like, oh, I think this is going to be a massive homer, switch to behind home plate.
My gosh,
massive homer from behind home plate or whatever.
Oh man. Oh my gosh.
I kind of think they did that once already because the Reese Hines, for some reason they flipped to behind home plate for one of his just massive homers.
Really?
Yeah, and it was just like, was it like a 2-0 count? And you just were like, you kind of like, well, let's flip real quick. Could be a homer.
We should tell the pitcher.
Yeah, we should tell the pitcher.
Well, no, like the AI is going to change the camera on you, buddy.
Yeah, you shouldn't throw this pitch.
Oh God. I wonder, actually, come to think of it, if we're doing this whole pitch com thing, I mean, this is just like, obviously it's been thought about before. I haven't, but I'm sure many
show
have.
all of us with a pitch what he selected before he throws.
You could do that. You have something
that's problematic for cheating purposes.
It's not even what I was getting at, though.
Oh, okay.
It was, you have a AI in between that it says like, are you sure about that, Matthew?
A little coach in the machine,
right? I mean, like, you could program that.
Oh my God, it'd be so easy. Well,
you could even just be like, all right, give me quickly, I need this information. Tell me the pitch com. Great, thank you so much. No, don't want to do it.
It'd be easy to program it, but what you're talking about would require hacking into the pitch com to like put your voice.
Oh no, I want my AI to just be like aware of it and tell me it. I don't want someone else's voice I don't want a computer elsewhere. I want the thing there living with me as I input it, being like, I know the situation. No.
Oh, just like a little Fitbit that sits next to next to your thing, and you're about to put slider in. It's like, Martin Maldonado, please do not put slider in.
Yeah, right. Just don't this. I mean, even as simple as like
AI
just don't do
says
these.
change up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we have the things that we flip over of like that have the notes of
Yeah.
okay, throw here, throw there, throw there. Like just do that, just build into the thing. Be like, yeah, no, it's that guy. I just saw how he looked on that last one. It gets a whole limb
Do you know
generation of
who
like
would hate this
you
so
leaned in
much?
on that one. We don't want that.
Chris Bassett would hate this so much. Chris Bassett, like, is like calling his own pitch, and the AI is like, no, Chris, don't call that. He's like, shut up. I want to throw. No, Chris, that would be a bad pitch. No. And I could just see him like, take the pitch, come off, and just,
yeah. Please confirm with this captcha. And the thing is, though, we're joking about this.
Yeah, somebody's
baseball's gonna be around for a long time. These questions are gonna.
This could at least be a player development tool that you kind of give your minor league pitchers to kind of coach them on the thought process of calling games.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like just let it happen in Atlantic League, but then they get up to the majors like, wait, where's Fred? Fred, I need Fred.
Fred, tell me, is a slider a good idea?
Oh my gosh, that's really true. And then
that's true. Like, maybe you don't want them depending on Fred.
Maybe that's what AAA is. Maybe AAA doesn't have it. And then like you're only allowed to have it in single A, double A.
That's when the training wheels come off.
Yeah.
And they're like, and you throw to ABS, also known as Clark. Clark's not as nice as Fred.
Oh man.
Now we're making.
Oh god. It's called one Kent then. Oh my gosh, this was a fun tangent here. I wanted to give you an opportunity. I just brought two pitchers to the table, and I'm curious if you had a certain guy that like you saw this past week, something's weirding you out, or you're just curious about you want to bring up today.
No, I think I brought up most of my guys. I don't know.
I gotta give you this opportunity every time because this is the core of what we do. Two pitchers, no subtitle. And it's
I guess my two pitchers were Birdsong and Holmes, but and Schwamback that I snuck in there.
What are you expecting from? Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing that was interesting about Birdsong was so the other day I took my son throwing, and he was super mad because he had forgotten his glove, and he really wanted us to drive back, but I didn't want to drive back to get the glove. So I made him pitch with my glove, and my glove is heavier. And so his command was off, but it was not necessarily off the way you'd think. One of the things that we think mechanically is if your front is too heavy, then you're going to open up and be behind, on the throwing arm. And then you're going to throw to the arm side. You're going to be wild to the arm side. He was wild to the glove side. So, and he's stomping around the mound, just to being a 12-year-old. And I was like, hey, let this be a learning lesson. Let's try some different cues to like see how you can affect this. What happens when you are going glove side? What do you need to do? So I was like, let's do this cue. How about you pull in your front side hard? Because that's what I thought is that he would be, the glove would be heavy and he would be like falling down on the front. So I was like, pull in your glove. Like, think about pulling in your glove when you throw. And that didn't work. And so I was like, all right, stick your glove in my eye, before you pull it in. Like, think about punching me in the eye with your glove before you throw. Right. And that sort of fixed it. And, and that was the lesson of the day for us was, first of all, mound composure. Like, come on, like you gotta, they're going to be bashing your head in some days. Yeah. And you just gotta figure out how to not cry on the mound, literally, as kids, and then the second part was like, run through cues. And so I was talking to Birdsong, and it was one of those things where I was like, I don't want to say it, but we both know it. Like, you have bad fastball command. So and I didn't know how to get there. And then he just said it. He's like, I know. I spray the fastball.
Like, why?
Like, okay. And he said the reason why he has better slider command is that you emphasize being out in front on sliders and breaking balls. And so he says he gets out in front and he gets to the right release place and he that's why he can replicate in sliders and
Mm-hmm.
curveballs well. And said he doesn't get to that place with fastballs. He opens up and he sprays it, you
Yeah.
know. And so he said he's done two things. Well, one thing is the same thing as my son, which is cycle through cues.
Yep.
And I think the cue that he said has been working a little bit for him is being tight in the front. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other way that you can help a person be tight in the front is put a weighted ball in their glove as they're pitching, and sort of emphasize that feeling of sort of pulling through, and like make that
Yeah.
front arm
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
stronger, even like maybe
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
need to
Sure.
be kind of stronger and rip through so that
Mm-hmm.
you get the front arm out there in time and you're
Right.
not behind and you're spraying the ball. So he's aware of it. And some of this coaching is happening at the major league level. Some of it happened at the minor league level. It's at 97. It is one of those things where it doesn't have great shape though. So what could happen is his command of it could get better as he gets older and he just sort of knows himself better.
Right.
But then the velo might be coming down at the same time. So he just may
Yeah.
never
So it
have a
might
good
not change
fastball.
anything. Yeah. Sure.
You know,
Well,
he may have
yeah. I mean,
slightly better
so
command as the shape gets slightly worse or the velo gets
well,
worse.
there's also like spin efficiency, right? And arm path changes spin efficiency a lot. So just how on top of it you are or not. I do see a world where his arm path does change a little for the fastball to make sure that's not as wild. If you're opening up so much, it does drag your arm a little differently.
Yeah.
If you're staying straighter, then you are actually going to get more on top of it.
So you think that could,
Yeah,
if he does those
it's
things, it could actually
possible.
affect his shape a little bit
It's
too.
sometimes that this has happened. I've seen it like both kind of tweak together.
Well, we saw that the Mackenzie Gore changed something about, where he stood on the mound, and that changed his
Yeah.
hips, and that changed movement on a lot of different pitches without having to do pitch design. He wasn't
Right.
doing the pitch design; he was cleaning up the
Doing mechanical stuff.
mechanics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other aspect, actually, what I thought the story you were telling about your son was going to go, and it might actually be the answer, is there are two ways to do it. You were talking about a lot about the end of it with a glove, but let's see. I've got the official Pitcher List edition Rawlings Pro Preferred Pitcher List Nick Pollack glove. It's about taking it out of the glove too. So if you have a different glove, sometimes it feels different and takes longer or shorter. So if you're used to a certain glove,
breaking of the hands or whatever
coming out, and where you are at certain points. So you're talking about cues, you're talking about like here, extending out, coming closer, sure, but it's also how fast is this arm getting to where it needs to.
Like
And
we could have tried as a different cue, take the ball out of the glove faster.
Taking a ball first and do everything like this already, and do the whole thing like that, and see if that would change it, which is awkward and weird and generally doesn't. But something to be thinking about is like I changed where my hands were. My coach made me do it so that to help against guys in the stretch, bring it down to my waist, because then I have a shorter arm circle, which I hated. I absolutely hated it, but there are a lot of things you can do with that too. Yeah.
And tying it back to the original thing, was there a pitch you just couldn't throw?
Oh yeah, I couldn't do. I mean, again, going back to like index finger stuff, I was just really bad at change-ups, circle changes, because it's ring finger. I don't want to throw with this. I have to throw everything with my index finger. Sliders, I only really started to learn what a slider was my junior year, and I had my curveball, which was worse than what it was in high school. But
I mean, it is interesting. We're like, if you want to be in the pros, you got to have a slider, and then you tell everybody under 12 you can't throw a slider.
I know.
And then you have this weird thing where, like, is the idea for all these kids that at 14 they learn the pitch that'll make them a major leaguer?
Yeah, right. It's like you need the foundations without it. I will say that if you go at it from I need to throw a baseball, not from a fastball, but from a slider, I do think that's not as healthy, because I think the best sliders are the ones that are built on the foundation of a fastball. That is how you think of it and release it. If you think of that you're throwing a slider, a lot of guys are like this. Like Zach Gallen told me about his slider, saying I call it a cutter, but it's a slider, because I need to think it's a cutter and not a slider. I need to make sure that I'm staying straight behind it all the way, like it's a fastball, like you would with a cutter. If I think it's a slider, then I'm going to open up too much and supinate too much. Right? You have to. Yeah. I think those are the best ones. The Jabba Chamberlain one is the classic gyro slider to me, and that is just he's throwing it straight over. He's just doing everything and straight down. boom. That's a fastball that happens to be a slider, right?
Yeah,
That's why I
just
think you
don't
start that way
understand
too.
why
Yeah.
like Nola and Morton haven't learned sliders, Like
I think it's their arm action.
I'm listening to you. Is their arm action? Because I'm listening to you, and I'm like, they've got to be front two finger dominant. They
Yeah.
can
So
pronate.
with that, if you can still hear me with
Supinate.
this, it's like curveball comes out like this. However, they are throwing from 3/4, and they're
Yeah.
coming around it like that. Essentially, they're coming around like this, right?
Uh-huh.
You do that with a slider, and you're already coming across it too much.
So it's
You're
just
not
a
really.
worse curveball?
You're not able to just go like this on if you're coming
Right.
across like that, right? Sorry for everybody listening on the podcast. You got to go watch the video. But so it makes sense for me. It was actually a struggle I had at first, and I had a fine one by the end of it, but I never really felt like I was getting straight out and down on it on the other side. That's why you have guys like Nola and Morden. They typically go the Clark Schmidt route, the sweeper, because you're on the side of it more, and instead of getting on top of it, right? So those that have like high IVB four seamers, that's why it's a Severino thing. High IVB four seamers means you're on top, and that means you're
Then
able to
you
go
throw a
down
good
too.
slider off that.
Right, and then it's more north-south.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm generally like, oh, sweeper's a main thing. Probably not a great fastball too. And then all of a sudden the whole thing cascades, right?
I mean, that's the sweeper is like kind of the sinker slider package. Is that what I think?
Right.
I think
Yeah,
you're a
that's what
sinker
I'm getting
sweeper
for.
guy.
Yeah. So
and then I want to
that's
know
kind of why.
how good your cutter and changeup are, because if you don't have really good cutter and changeup, you're Hayden Wisniewski.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then and then the last thing I want to mention with Hayden, what's interesting about Hayden, you're talking about more about opening up. And when I watch him, it's more about just being too north. Like just everything is just way up. It's not always
In
missing
the
arm
zone?
side. No. It's like a foot above a lot. There's so many misses with Hayden. They're just like,
okay.
All the way up there, right? And it's very rare to see him. I mean, I could be wrong, but see him
I don't
missing
know what
down.
mechanically you're doing when you miss up but over the zone.
It's over the plate, and I mean it's the same thing. It just means that he's a north-south guy. He's just tilting like this, like
early or something. Or
he's not. Well, just think of it this way. If you are coming at it like this, like a diagonal, right, 45-degree angle, when you miss too early, it's going to go both,
up.
Both X and Y axis. But if you're only Y axis and you're over the plate already and you miss, it's going to be just up. Right? Birdsong is very much of I think he is more north-south. And I mean, look at the curve. The curve is his best thing, and that thing is not like a big, wide, horizontal pitch. That's over the top guy. That's a slider. That's a gyro one, right? So my instinct is like, oh, you just gotta get your arm out sooner.
Yeah,
you gotta don't the end.
Maybe you could clean up something in the back, like a shorter.
Yeah, that's why I'm talking about the glove stuff. That was a transition.
Yeah.
You gotta get the arm out sooner. That's my idea. And sometimes when you see that, like, watch him do the whole Giolito shift. The elbow straight out.
Up. Yeah.
Honestly, that could be it for Birdsong, right? So I don't. There are things like that get me kind of intrigued, because when you're not missing as much east-west, I feel like, oh, well, that's a much easier thing to figure out.
Glass now, right? It's like, he's up down. Let's just give him one target. Although I was watching for targets. Was it Harrison? Who was I watching? They gave him one target. Joe Boyle.
Why? I'm shocked. He actually hit him. It was a 62% zone rate for Joe Boyle.
He's doing the one target.
Yeah, but like he hit
everything. No, I mean, oh my God.
On his fastball, not his slider. 52% strike rate on the slider, 62% zone rate on the fastball. I'm just saying. That's good.
Yeah. So the target for the fastball, the target was the same for the fastball and the slider.
Yeah, right.
And the fastball was actually, the fastball, he dotted some. Like it looked okay.
Well, down the middle, right?
Yeah. The slider, like people doubt that pitchers miss by 13 inches. They should watch that start, because he was missing by like 28 inches.
Oh my gosh, it's so much.
The target was high and away for lefties.
Yeah.
That was the one target. And he would yank sliders that almost hit the left-hander in the foot.
Oh my gosh.
And you're like, are you really using that target, or are you just not even using any target?
Yeah, there's nothing here.
I photoshopped him in the Wild Thing jacket and shirt.
Nice.
And glasses. And
that's amazing.
I can't help but like, I'm fascinated by Joe Boyle starts. I can't say that I love watching them. They're a little bit painful, but like I'm fascinated by the idea. So if you, Birdsong is a better example of this, where like, got a good slider. He's got good velo. There's something that I like. I would love to take him if we were talking like fantasy. I'd love to take him late in the draft. I'd love to,
Sure.
As a pitching
right.
coach.
You think what you're saying is that you do see someone who could also make some tweak with the fastball that actually is tangible.
As a pitching
but
coach,
more
I would
so
love
than
to have
another
Birdsong.
command guy. Totally with you there, especially considering the curveball has become the number 2 pitch for him. Really, the number 1, I should say.
It's getting better.
Say for one game actually was there for him since that first Colorado game. So it's like
but Boyle might be a coach killer.
Oh no, he's a reliever. Like there's no question in my head that Joe Boyle's a reliever. But I think that's got to end it for this week. What are you working on right now? What do we got?
I've got a piece up today where we picked the 2028 Olympic team.
Oh my gosh.
We actually had some projections, courtesy Dan Zaborski, so we had a little fun with it. And a piece going up tomorrow about what the secret sauce is analytically behind the Orioles hitters. So got some VBA talk in there.
Nice.
VBA, the IVB of hitters.
Love it. And for us, I mean, guys, you can watch this on YouTube as well, of course, with Fireside Chat and On the Corner too. So go check those out on YouTube. But that is going to do it for this episode of The Craft. Special thanks to Eno Sarris for being such a wonderful guest today. My name is Nick Pollack, and we'll talk about the craft of pitching again next week. Goodbye.